bulk of the presentation. So I'll pass it over to Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Womack. I have 9 years experience as an educator in the DeKalb County school system, and I am currently department co-chair at my school, and I also chair several different organizations, and I'm looking forward to our presentation tonight. I'm passing it on to Evelyn.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Bird, and I've been in education for about 15 years now. And I have been working from anywhere from pre-K all the way up to grade 12. Now work for Fort Valley State University as a department chair. I'll pass it on to William.
Hello, I'm William Shepard. I'm a manufacturing robotics teacher at Crawford County High School. Also the CTA coordinator and SLO coordinator for the district. And I'll be covering the conclusion and implications of our article. And I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron and then share my screen with everyone.
Okay, we have our PowerPoint should be showing up here in just a moment. Here we go. And the introductory slide here just, again, goes through the title of the article, How Does Leadership Affect Student Achievement? Results from a U.S. National Survey. We have the authors there, collaborated on the article, and it was published in March of 2010. As an introduction here to the article, the authors sort of suggest, through previous literature, that leadership does make a difference in schools. Many of the previous studies that they cited, they focused on leadership and how leadership relates to changes in teacher behavior and what happens in the classroom. The premise is that students are affected as teacher behavior changes. The purpose of the author study was to look at leadership and connect leader behaviors to student outcomes and achievement. So they looked at 3 specific leadership qualities. They wanted to look at instructional leadership, that is improving teaching in the classroom. They wanted to look at shared leadership, engaging teachers and teacher leaders, and then they wanted to look at trust. And so they looked at those 3 areas. On the next slide here, we're going to sort of define those terms in depth a little bit more. The authors did this in the article. And in terms of instructional leadership, leaders must have an understanding of the curriculum, the content, as well as instructional materials. Leaders must also develop innovative and improved learning environments. And this is particularly true at the secondary level, where it's a lot harder for the leader to know exactly all of the content in every course. It's much easier at an elementary level. But they can improve the environment, and that's a focus at the secondary level. Shared leadership, we have the definition here. As defined in the article, teachers' influence over and participation in school-wide decision-making. And again, they cited previous literature in their literature reviews. And it suggested that shared leadership has a limited impact on student achievement. May also reduce teacher feelings of isolation, though, so it does have some positive aspects there. And then trust. Principals build trust indirectly by supportive behavior, but they cannot make teachers trust one another. The authors discussed 2 research questions in particular, and they sought to answer these 2 questions. Do the 3 specific attributes of leadership behavior, that is, sharing of leadership, development of trust, and the provision of support for instructional improvement, affect teachers' work with each other in their classroom practices? And then the next question was, do these leadership behaviors and attributes of formal school leaders contribute to student achievement? So they sought to look at those 2 areas and answer those questions. I will turn it over to Jasmine to discuss sort of the methods and how they went about the study.
Good evening. My name is Jasmine, and I will be discussing the methods used to conduct and collect the research. The data was collected during 2 studies that were conducted in 2005 and 2008. It was mixed methods research, and it actually began in December 2004 with the purpose to deepen understanding about the nature of successful educational leadership and understand how leadership at the school, district, and state levels influences teaching and learning in schools. Quantitative data was collected at the end of 5 years of work, with 3 rounds of qualitative data collection in between. The quantitative data was provided by surveys of teachers and administrators along with demographic data and student achievement data from the district and state levels. The respondents consisted of 180 schools among 9 states. Can we go to the next slide, please? The schools were randomly sampled from 4 quadrants in the United States, and the states were randomly chosen. Districts and schools were randomly chosen from the states, with the samples reflecting a variation in school size, socioeconomic status, and achievement trajectories. Both elementary and secondary schools were represented in equal numbers in the surveys. 157 schools completed the quantitative samples. It was the teachers and the administrators in the schools who completed the surveys. And both surveys contained items from both pre-established surveys and new surveys that were created. The variables which measure attitudes and feelings were measured with a 6-point Likert scale, which measures, and we've all seen those. Those are the scales which measure from 1 to 6, normally with 1 being very satisfied and 6 being extremely dissatisfied, and the numbers in between giving a different variety of feelings or whatnot. The changes in wording from the 2008 to the 2005 samples to the 2008 samples were made to improve clarity, and the paper-based surveys were completed during faculty meetings. The surveys were accompanied with blank envelopes for the teachers to put their answers in, so that the answers would be confidential and so that the school administrators would not be able to see the responses. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next, we'll be talking about variable construction. And these were the 6 different variables that the survey questions focused on. We had focused instruction. The second survey that was given in 2008, they found that teachers incorporated elements of both constructivist and direct instruction in their classroom, and the results were actually different than they had previously thought. The second variable construction was the teacher's professional learning community. The data measuring professional learning communities was taken from the 2005 survey. However, results from both of the years, from the 2005 and 2008 surveys, indicates that the teachers' relationships with one another was a very stable characteristic among all teachers, and teachers generally thought that it was important in their work environment. The third variable construction was shared leadership, and this variable was developed based on the 2005 survey, where the teachers rated their principals' behaviors and gave feedback on how they felt about it. Next, we have instructional leadership, and this variable was actually modified in the 2008 survey, and the 2008 survey incorporated additional items focusing on specific principal behaviors, and that was a change that the 2005 survey originally did not include. Next, we had the trust in the school principal. As the study developed, the researchers became more interested in this component, and the 2008 survey added items taken from a pre-designed a survey that had already existed, and the answers scaled very well. The last variable constructor item was student achievement. And the data used to measure student achievement was taken from state websites. It was not through survey. It was taken from state websites, and it included school-wide results in both language and mathematics exams that were distributed over 5 years. The achievement was actually represented by meets and exceeds percentages in order to keep all the results stable. And scores from 2005 were used as opposed to scores from 2008. The researchers used scores from 2005 because in terms of mathematics instruction nationwide, they came to the conclusion that math instruction was more consistent, and fewer states in the sample had made changes to the state test in 2005. So it gave more reliable results. Next slide, please. In terms of analysis, the results were analyzed by a paired sample t-test, and they were used to compare mean ratings on the variables to determine whether there were differences between the schools. And although data for achievement in mathematics was reported, similar analysis was conducted using the state literacy test scores. So the same methods that they used to gather the mathematics data and report it, they also use those same methods to report the literacy, the language test scores, but they only really reported on the mathematics scores. And the math and state literacy test results were similar. Next, we'll pass it to Evelyn.
Yes, my colleague Erin spoke about research questions, and my colleague spoke about methods. Now I'm going to speak about findings. In the article, it talked about how it was assumed that the effects of leadership on student achievement were largely due to indirect and operated through other variables. Of the findings, an examination in Table 2 in the article indicated that student math achievement scores are significantly associated with focused instruction, professional community, and teachers' trust in the principal, but not significantly related to the principal's behavior. Next slide, please. As aforementioned, it also related to instructional leadership and shared leadership. It also had to deal with, the findings also had to deal with the trust in the principal and the professional community and how it was associated with student math achievement. It also suggested that in the relationships among adults, there were other factors that were contributory, which determined how well students performed. Next slide. In the example, the findings indicated that the students in the elementary schools perform ironically better than the students in the secondary school on state benchmark tests. And the data also supported other studies that many measures the teacher's quality and work, such as trust, professional community experiences, and strong leadership. And it also was significantly lower in secondary schools as well. Next slide. What the results ultimately showed was that it confirmed and suggested that further analysis would needed to be investigated on how relationships among the variables, as mentioned by my colleague, may needed to be combined and affect teachers' classrooms and practices with student learning. Next slide. As mentioned by Aaron in the initial 2 research questions, there was a 3-model approach used, and in that 3-model approach, they looked at principal behavior with regard to teachers' work, the relationship between the professional community and instruction with regard to principal behavior and characteristics, and then added at the end of it was added school level, which affects the the professional learning community and instruction. Next slide, please. When the Model 3 was used, it also indicated that when building level was added into the research, the professional community weighed more than trust, which was an account for a negative relationship between the secondary school and trust in the principal. Yet overall, in the relationship among the adults, it was found that it was better relationship when adults interacted with each other opposed to when the teacher and principal interacted with each other, or either the teacher or teacher. But when it came to adults, the communication between adults, it seemed that the relationship contributed to a lot more trust. Next slide. So, as I stated before, there were 2 questions initially stated, and when it came to the findings, the same considerations were also considered as with question number 2. However, the results indicated that the instructional practices were, had significantly results on the achievement. It diminished when it was introduced to the professional community, and then it also diminished even further when the school level and school demographic characteristics played a part in it. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to speak about the conclusion, the summary, and the implications. There are several leadership variables and trusts that are positively related to student achievement. Some of those leadership variables are instructional leadership, shared leadership, and trust in the principal. And when considered together, along with the whole trust factor, it has a positive relationship to student achievement. Increasing the instructional capacity, which is shared leadership, can influence student learning. Excuse me. The exercise of leadership for student achievement appears to be easier in elementary schools. Previous studies have shown that the emotional side of school leader behavior to have a strong relationship to student outcomes. Findings diminish on the emotional side along with reported leader behavior are taken into consideration. The authors are not prepared to discount the importance of the emotional side of leadership. It is something that does show a positive relationship with student achievement. Because trust is highly correlated with other measures, they're inclined to say that the findings require additional exploration and need a little bit more research on that. They should build on the existing work on emotions of leadership, but also incorporate attention to more instrumental leader actions. All these things do have a positive relationship with student achievement. Shared leadership and instructional leadership are indirectly related to student achievement. They are part of the whole plan, the whole process that improves student achievement. Strong relationships due to the way teachers organize themselves in the professional communities. Individual interventions seem less important than detailed investigations of elementary schools. Research demonstrates complementary approaches combining leadership foci, transformation, and instructional. These are all things that play a part. Some of the issues, the research sample is large, but it was limited to a single country. Leadership and its effects are deeply embedded in national as well as organizational cultures. The limitations of structural equation modeling, or SEM, assume causality and possible omitted variables. Some of those variables that may be missing are important to the district and student demographic characteristics. The implications: both teachers and those with formal administrative responsibilities need to acknowledge and act on the increased importance of collective and shared work around instruction. Kind of goes back to the shared leadership. It's important to provide significant additional support for secondary school leaders to establish the kind of instructional leadership that is workable in their larger and more complex settings. School leaders preparation and professional development programs should continue to emphasize both the softer, the emotional side, and the harder behavioral aspects of leadership. While there's an increased emphasis on the responsibility of principals for student test scores, it's important to remember that the primary focus within the school must be on instructional and shared leadership. So all this ties into the chapters we read, especially chapter 16, the mixed method. This research was a mixed method where they collect information beforehand and information at the end and throughout. So this all ties in to what we have read in our textbook and our presentation from Dr. Bryant. So we hope you enjoyed the presentation. That's the end of it, and thank you for watching.